Good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of the Flash News. I am Oyin Opala. When we come back right after the break, we'll go into the full details of today's Flash News. Well, you're welcome back. For today, let's start with U.S. President Biden and Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu discussing the ceasefire. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Joe Biden had a significant conversation on Sunday about the ongoing negotiations for a Gaza ceasefire hostage deal. The call was a crucial step in intensifying efforts to reach a deal before Donald Trump's inauguration next week. Netanyahu expressed his gratitude to both Biden and Trump for their cooperation in this sensitive matter, referring to it as a holy mission. The negotiations mediated by the US, Egypt, and Qatar have been ongoing for a year, with several moments where a deal seemed within each other. All right, we'll take a pause right here, and when we come back, we'll continue with this negotiation deal. Well, you're Welcome back. Talking about the negotiations before the break. Now, the negotiations and the mediation by the US, Egypt, and Qatar have been ongoing for a year now, with several moments where a deal seemed within reach, only to stall. However, US officials are now hopeful that an agreement can be sealed soon. The talks are currently focused on a phased ceasefire, with Netanyahu committed to the first phase, which involves a partial hostage release in exchange for a week-long halt in fighting. The proposal, initially laid out by Biden in May, aims to address their core issues, including the release of hostages, the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza as well, and increased humanitarian aid to the enclave. Biden reiterated his call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, emphasizing the need for the return of hostages and emphasized humanitarian support as well. The situation on the ground remains there, with over 46,000 Palestinians killed, mostly children and women, and more than 80,000 of the population displaced from their homes. The families of the roughly 100 hostages still held in Gaza are pressing Netanyahu to reach a deal to bring their loved ones home. Meanwhile, Palestinians in Gaza are cautiously optimistic, waiting to see tangible results from the negotiation. The involvement of high-level Israeli officials, such as the head of the Mossad Foreign Intelligence Agency, David Bernier, and Biden's top Mideast advisor, Britt McGurk, in the talk suggests that a deal may be closer than ever. However, as Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, I beg your pardon, noted, being very close still means we are far from reaching a final agreement. Oh well, all of this, could this be because Trump's inauguration is only 8 days away? And what's the newest on that particular report? So Donald Trump is gearing up for his second inauguration as the 47th president of the United States. Well, of course, this is scheduled to take place on the 20th of January 2025. He's announced his nominees for various ambassadorial positions, including Peter Lamelas to Argentina, Arthur Fisher to Australia, and Herschel Walker to the Bahamas. Trump has also tapped Mike Huckabee as the U.S. ambassador to Israel and Charles Kushner, his son-in-law's father, as the ambassador to France. So many more appointments there. As for his inauguration, it's going to be a very big event with a swearing-in ceremony, signing ceremony, inaugural luncheon, pass-in review procession, and a parade as well. The Trump-Vance inaugural committee is handling the planning, and they have received donations from tech companies like OpenAI, Meta, and Amazon. Some foreign leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, have been invited to the ceremony. Trump's also been making headlines with his recent comments and actions, including his nomination of J.D. Vance as his vice president. The inauguration is expected to be a significant event, with many people attending and watching from around the world. It's going to be an interesting one to see, and we are all waiting to see how everything unfolds as well. How about Ukraine? Ukraine is facing a really tough situation right now, with its troops struggling to hold their ground against Russia along the front line. The country is also dealing with a shortage of experienced soldiers, which is making it even harder to defend themselves. And to make matters worse, there is a lot of uncertainty about whether the military aid they have been receiving will continue to arrive at the same rate. It is not just the US that has been providing aid, by the way. Lots of other countries have been pitching in, like Australia, which has given over 1.3 billion Australian dollars in military support, including things like armored personnel carriers, mine-resistant vehicles, and even some pretty advanced weaponry like the JDAMER guided bombs. Belgium has also been a big contributor with things like infantry mobility vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and even more naval vessels. And Australia has its territory to be used for transporting weapons to Ukraine, which has been a big help, by the way. But despite all this aid, Ukraine is still in a pretty precarious situation. The US has been the biggest provider of military aid, with over $174 billion in aid pledged since the start of the war. However, With Donald Trump set to re-enter the White House, there are certainties that this aid might not continue at the same level. This could have serious consequences for Ukraine's ability to defend itself. It is something that the country's leader are definitely worried about. Is what noting that the Ukraine's defense contact group, which is made up of 57 countries, including all 32 NATO member states, has been coordinating their military aid efforts. This group has been meeting regularly to discuss the situation and figure out how to best support Ukraine. But even with all this support, Ukraine is still facing some really tough choices in the coming months. The country's leaders will have to decide how to allocate their limited resources and have to prioritize their defense and its efforts. It's a really difficult situation and none that will require some careful planning and strategy. Well, that's not all. The new year has started and schools have resumed in earnest. But that is not to be said about the students, pupils, and teachers in the Cameroons because the teachers have planned to start the year with a huge strike. While other nations start the year with new energy, it looks like teachers' trade union, the Sinecam in the Cameroons, are planning a strike in public and secondary schools across the Cameroons, started on January 15, 2025. The strike is intended to pressure the government to reopen dialogue with teachers and address some major concerns, including signing and implementation of a special status for teachers and the payment of debt owed to educators. This isn't the first time teachers have spoken out about their issues. Last year, hundreds of thousands of children had their education disrupted due to protests over deteriorating conditions and unpaid salaries, some of which date back to years. It is worth noting that President Paul Biya's recent stated that dialogue between the government and teachers union is ongoing, but it seems like the Sinicam is looking for more concrete action. The union's president, Edward in Asuma, has announced that the strike will last for an undefined period. So that means school is not even going to be starting, which could mean a long and uncertain road ahead for students and teachers alike. Interestingly, this strike isn't the only one happening in the Cameroon's educational sector right now. We've got this report about a strike by higher education teachers initiated by the Higher Education Teachers Union, SENES, which started on the 6th of January. And what was the reason? Obviously, over unpaid research allowances and grants promised since 2009. It seems like there are some deep-seated issues in Cameroon's education system that needs to be addressed. The government has raised the public sector payroll by 100 billion francs CFA in 2025, which might be an attempt to alleviate some of the financial pressures on teachers. However, it is unclear whether this will be enough to meet the demands of the Sinicam and other teachers' union. With the strike looming, it's likely that we will see some significant developments in the coming weeks. Not because we want to be positive, but we already know these strategies and how it operates. Well, we look forward to more of this report as we'll follow up with all of the reports that surrounds the educational sector in the Cameroons. And this is where we draw the curtains on today's flash news. Just to remind you that at the top of the hour, 8 p.m. Amber time, we will be having the Undaunted full briefings. Do well to stay with us for now. Until then, have a wonderful day.